Hi, so my name is Heather Francis, and I'm currently a junior at Montclair State University, and I'm studying international justice with minors in environmental justice and nutrition food science. So I'm currently running for next year's student government treasurer, and I don't know if you've seen my platform on HawkSync or have seen me around campus, but I guess the first thing I would introduce myself as is an activist first and foremost, which is why I'm running for this position on the executive e-board. So I was first hesitant and actually didn't even want to run for student government because of, just personal frustrations that I've seen with the Student Government Association. And with the newly elected e-board, I felt very empowered to join them and support them with focusing on social justice initiatives that is most of their priorities. And so that's my first goal, is to make social justice initiatives a priority for the Student Government Association. I would say my second goal would be to make everything transparent. As treasurer, I oversee the $1.3 million budget, and I think that students here have deserve the right to see clearly and explicitly what we're spending that money on, which I hope I can make available through reports on HawkSync that can be easily accessible, and also allow students a forum to challenge how we spend that money, which I think also goes into giving students support and encouragement in terms of being a warm voice and having the ability to have students trust me and trust the Student Government Executive Board in coming to us, because I know that as it is now, there's a stigma, and it seems that student government isn't a place people feel fear to go or don't want to go, or feel like their opinions are not worth anything, or that they'll be turned to somebody else and their questions won't get answered or their emails won't get answered. And I want to make it a priority that students here feel important, which I would say is an essential goal of mine, is for students to feel important. And I would say my last goal is to recommend to student organizations to spend their funds sustainably and ethically, and also make it a priority as treasurer that what we spend as a student government association is bettering our earth and bettering our community through making sure every purchase we make is not spent on what's most cost efficient, but more so what is actually doing something that can impact our community, so it is sustainable and ethical. So I would say the insufficiencies that I see in the current treasurer's office comes from the amount of paperwork and lack of organization that exists within the office. I don't think, though, that this is at fault of the treasurer or the bookkeeper at all, because there's a numerous amount of different paperwork that gets put through the treasurer's office day in and day out, and it takes a long time for different co-sponsorship contracts to go through, PIEFs to go through, purchase recs to go through, and it also takes, with the constant overturn of executive boards on student organizations who have to constantly retrain different e-board members, that takes a lot of time. And I know last year, Youssef and Jason worked very hard to make the system paperless and tried to reduce the amount of paperwork that goes in and out. And while this wasn't exactly, it didn't exactly work out, it doesn't mean that that's not something that we as an executive board, well, personally me as treasurer, should go back into to find a way to make the student government paperwork paperless through another website, which I know is under works right now. And before that is something that's going to happen, I would say that there needs to be another person in the office, either working part-time or either helping out as another financial clerk to sort through the paperwork to make it more efficient. And I also know that Class 3 organizations are currently undergoing a way to not have to go to legislative meetings every week. So I think that this is kind of, when I see the insufficiencies and unorganization that's in the treasurer's office, I think that this comes from the amount of paperwork that is in the office, and to make it paperless, there needs to be a way for that to happen so the treasurer has more time to spend on other initiatives that they can focus on, which is something that I intend to do. As treasurer, I will oversee the $1.3 million budget that students pay about $50 per semester on. And I don't necessarily think, as of now, there needs to be a change as to how much money is put towards each line. I think when we look at each line, we need to see what we need to do to efficiently use that money for sustainable and ethical use. So before we even think about changing how much money is put towards each line, we need to start with, okay, so we're purchasing food for an event, for an example, for a conference. Okay, what kind of food? Where's this food coming from? What impact is that making? And then we can see what we can do to add money to that account, or see if we would actually be able to take money out of that account. And for example, we purchase safe sex supplies every year, or when they run out, well, the safe sex supplies that we are purchasing needs to be supplies that are allergen friendly, support the ecosystem, vegan friendly, cruelty free. And so it depends on how much money that is going to cost. And another thing we need to focus on is also SLAM, which is our programming board. They are a programming board and they focus on fun events for our student body, but also they should be given the opportunity in their line to create educational events that can better the student community for their programs. And one thing that I definitely want to end as treasurer is the trip that students here pay each year for the student government executive boards to go on at the end. So senior trip, like this year they're going to Punta Cana, and the student government students are paying for 8 executive boards to go. And I think that's quite unfair, and I think that those funds can be used more efficiently. And if it's to reward the student government officers for all the work they've done, it could be used for a book. It can be used for book credit, or it can be used for scholarship. It can be used for something more beneficial than for a drinking fest over in Punta Cana. That's just my honesty, putting it out there. And I think when it comes to our budget, we need more room in the budget to focus on social justice initiatives for student affairs, where, support these committees so they can have, an avenue if they want to hold events and, have, educational forums for students on campus about different student affairs issues. And, that's my job as treasurer, is to make sure that these lines are used efficiently, but also ethically and sustainably. I would say I have the experience to be treasurer and maintain a budget of $1.3 million based on my experience as a president for 2 years of a student organization on campus. I've worked in a managerial position at an organic farm, and I currently work as a supervisor where I oversee money at my job, every week. So I think that I have the capacity and organizational skills to be able to oversee a budget, and especially working in a student organization where I've worked with my treasurer and oversaw my budget for 2 years. And I would say, I think what makes me also really, qualified and is based on my viewpoint of money. I think our culture sees money as this way of how to be most cost effective and how to buy things that are cheap, and making sure that we are, oh, like that's too expensive, we can't buy that, where it's like, okay, well, why don't we look at this again and see, well, why are we buying the thing that's more expensive? Are we buying it because it's actually going to make a bigger impact on, our earth? Or if like a student organization wants to have a speaker come and people are like, oh, why are you spending so much money on a speaker? Well, what is that speaker? Like, is the speaker going to come and impact a group of students? Well, then of course they should be allowed to invite a speaker onto campus because they're making a difference into students' lives. And I think that having that viewpoint of money and to see it as something that has a lot of power in terms of making a greater impact rather than placing a carbon footprint on our earth, I think that makes me highly qualified for this position. Thank you for tuning in and listening to these questions in my platform. Vote for me next Monday through Wednesday, April 16th through April 18th.